Hello and welcome. You've probably heard someone say that a spoonful of honey can do wonders for your health. But is honey really that special? The truth is, this food has been part of human history for thousands of years. Ancient civilizations used honey not only as a food, but also in practices related to health and healing. And today, with modern science, some of these ancient observations have begun to be studied in much greater detail. But there's an important difference between saying that honey has interesting properties and claiming that it can treat or cure diseases. So, in today's video, we're going to understand how honey is produced by bees, why it can make it difficult for certain microorganisms to grow, which benefits have the strongest scientific evidence, and which ones still require more research. And make sure you stay until the end, because we're also going to talk about a very important precaution when it comes to consuming honey. If you enjoy content about health, nutrition, and well-being, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss our upcoming videos. Honey has been part of human history for thousands of years. The history of honey is much older than most of us realize. Cave paintings found in Spain, dating back thousands of years, show humans collecting honey from wild beehives. At that time, the refined sugar we know today simply wasn't part of the human diet. Honey was a concentrated source of energy and one of the few readily available ways to obtain a naturally sweet flavor. In ancient Egypt, its importance was even greater. Honey appears in records related to food and was also used in traditional medical practices. For example, it was included in preparations intended for wounds and burns. Centuries later, other cultures continued to use honey. In ancient Greece, honey was valued for its nutritional properties and was also incorporated into different health practices. In Ayurvedic medicine, honey also became part of traditional preparations. In other words, there is a very long history behind this food. But how exactly does a bee transform a small amount of flower nectar into something so different? That's what makes honey even more fascinating. How do bees turn nectar into honey? It all begins with worker bees. They fly from flower to flower, collecting the nectar produced by plants. This nectar is stored in a specialized structure known as the honey crop, sometimes referred to as the honey stomach. And this is where something remarkable begins to happen. The nectar starts coming into contact with enzymes produced by the bees themselves. When the bee returns to the hive, the nectar goes through a process of transfer between bees known as trophallaxis. During this process, additional enzymes are added, and the composition of the nectar begins to change. One of these enzymes, invertase, helps break down sucrose into simpler sugars, mainly glucose and fructose. But there's still a problem. The nectar initially contains a lot of water. To become the thick honey we know, that water needs to be reduced. And this is where another impressive behavior of bees comes into play. They continuously move their wings inside the hive, helping to evaporate the water. Once the moisture level reaches an appropriate point, the honey is stored in the honeycomb cells and sealed with beeswax. And this combination of a high concentration of sugars and a low amount of water helps explain one of honey's most interesting characteristics: its ability to make it difficult for many microorganisms to grow. Why does honey make it difficult for bacteria to grow? Honey has several natural mechanisms that help limit the growth and proliferation of microorganisms. The first is related to its high concentration of sugars and low water activity. In simple terms, this environment is not favorable for many types of bacteria. The second factor is acidity. Most types of honey have an acidic pH, which can also make it more difficult for certain microorganisms to multiply. But there is another interesting mechanism as well. The enzyme glucose oxidase, naturally present in honey, can contribute to the formation of small amounts of hydrogen peroxide when honey is diluted. This is one of the mechanisms associated with honey's antimicrobial activity. And this helps explain why honey has attracted so much interest in the field of wound care. But there is one particular type of honey that has attracted even more attention from researchers: the famous Manuka honey. What makes Manuka honey different? Manuka honey is produced primarily from the nectar of the Manuka plant, which is found in New Zealand and also in Australia. It gained attention because it has antimicrobial activity associated among other factors, with the presence of a compound called methylglyoxal, or MgO. This has made Manuka honey the subject of numerous scientific studies. There are even medical products specifically developed using medical-grade honey for certain applications. But it's important to make a distinction here. We're not talking about taking just any jar of honey from the supermarket and applying it directly to a wound. Honey used in medical settings is processed and sterilized to meet specific safety standards. And this brings us to one of the applications of honey that has some of the most interesting evidence behind it. Honey and wound care. The use of honey on wounds is ancient. But today, there is scientific research evaluating this practice in a much more rigorous way. Medical-grade honey products may help create a protective barrier over a wound and, depending on the specific product and situation, may have properties that contribute to controlling microorganisms and maintaining a favorable wound environment. Researchers are also interested in honey's potential effects on inflammation and tissue cleansing. For this reason, medical-grade honey products are used in certain clinical situations, including some types of burns and wounds. But once again, this does not mean that regular kitchen honey should be applied directly to a wound. Wound treatment needs to be evaluated according to the cause, depth, presence of infection, and other individual factors. So, when we talk about medicinal honey, we're talking about a specific product being used in a controlled and appropriate medical context. And there's another application of honey that is much more familiar in everyday life. Relieving a cough. Honey for cough. What does the research show? Honey is commonly used to soothe throat irritation during episodes of coughing. Clinical studies have examined this effect, particularly in children with upper respiratory tract infections. The results suggest that honey may help reduce coughing, especially at night, and improve sleep quality in certain situations. One possible explanation is that honey forms a kind of protective coating over the lining of the throat, helping to reduce the sensation of irritation. But there is one fundamental rule. Honey should never be given to children under 1 year of age, due to the risk of infant botulism. We'll talk more about this important precaution in just a moment. But first, we need to take a look at another interesting component of honey. Its antioxidants. Honey and antioxidants. In addition to sugars, honey contains a variety of other compounds. Among them are flavonoids and phenolic compounds. These substances have antioxidant activity and can help neutralize certain free radicals. The amount and type of these compounds can vary considerably depending on the floral source of the honey. In general, some darker varieties of honey have greater antioxidant activity than lighter color varieties. This does not mean that any specific type of honey can prevent or treat diseases on its own, but it does show that honey is chemically much more complex than simply being a source of sugar. And this complexity has led researchers to investigate other potential functions, including possible effects on metabolism and gut health. Honey, blood sugar, and gut health. Promising areas still being studied. Some studies have investigated whether honey may have different effects from refined sugar on certain metabolic markers. There are preliminary findings suggesting possible effects on blood sugar and cholesterol levels. There's also research investigating components of honey that may have prebiotic-like effects, potentially supporting certain beneficial bacteria in the gut microbiome. But this is where we need to be very careful. These findings are interesting, but they do not mean that honey is a treatment for diabetes, high cholesterol, or intestinal problems. Larger and more consistent studies are still needed before firm conclusions can be drawn. And there is one thing we should never forget. Even though it is natural, honey is still a concentrated source of sugar. That's why the amount you consume matters too. Important precautions you need to know. The first and most important precaution concerns babies. Children under 1 year of age should not consume honey. This is because honey may contain spores of the bacterium Clostridium botulinum. In older children and adults, the digestive system generally creates conditions that are less favorable for these spores to cause this problem. In babies, however, the gut is still developing, which increases the risk of infant botulism. Another important point concerns people with diabetes. The fact that honey is natural does not mean that it won't raise blood sugar. Honey contains sugars, and should be consumed in moderation, especially by people who need to manage their blood glucose levels. That's why we should not turn honey into some kind of miracle food. After everything we've discussed, what is the real conclusion? Honey truly is a fascinating food. It has a history spanning thousands of years, a complex chemical composition, and natural mechanisms that help explain its antimicrobial activity. There is interesting evidence supporting some applications, particularly for cough relief and the use of medical-grade honey products for certain types of wound care. There is also ongoing research into its antioxidants and its possible metabolic and gut-related effects. But not everything has been proven. Honey is not a miracle medicine, and it does not replace medical treatment. The best way to look at it is as a natural food with interesting characteristics that can be part of a balanced diet when consumed in moderation. And perhaps that is the most impressive part of this entire story. What bees have been producing for thousands of years continues to spark the curiosity of modern science. If you enjoyed this content, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone who also enjoys learning about the foods that are part of our everyday lives. And remember, health information should always be used responsibly. This content is for educational purposes only and does not replace the advice or evaluation of a qualified healthcare professional.